There's so many words, flexibility, adaptability, like we could just go on and on. But those did not come from, this is where we get into Enver Navigate, because they didn't come from when you were on the path navigating. It came from when you're actually off the path navigating. That challenge, you are off your path of where you wanted to be, but man, you have learned some things that actually serve you today.
LaVonna, how are you today?
I am fabulous, West. How are you?
You know what? I'm dandy. It has been a heck of a week and a really cool start to the school year. I mean, as you know, we do a lot of work with school districts from around the country. So the past couple of months has been like main startup, like, pedal to the metal, all gas, no brakes. So we're starting to finally get into the holiday season, which is kind of that downward slope for us where things start to kind of level out. So, it's a fun time of year for us. How about you?
I'd say the same. This is where we're like, okay, things are starting to level out a little bit, and you have the excitement of the year, which is so fun and awesome and busy and crazy. But then you have a chance to go, okay, a little bit of breathing room, and then we know that it picks back up. So it's just a really cool process to witness each year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so we're going to get into, talking about, Shine and the whole philosophy and kind of strategy that you've put together. But before we get into that, yeah, I know you travel the country and you speak to groups all over the country and you do a lot of that. Have you been doing a lot of traveling in the past several months or been staying pretty local? Because I know you're in Florida, correct?
I'm in St. Pete. So it's that Tampa Bay area, which is incredible. But yeah, well, I would say traveling a lot, but I've also had to be home because we've had the craziness of the hurricanes. And
Yeah.
so it's one that we know is coming and we do our best with it. But been hit with some doozies this time. And so figuring out how to get through that. And so one of them I actually didn't make it home. I got stuck in Atlanta. And then the next one I did come home, but then had to evacuate to Orlando or somewhere. We chose Orlando. And so it's been an interesting ride for sure, but love, love, love living here because it's paradise. Just it isn't when it isn't.
Yeah, no, yeah, you guys have definitely been just rattled by storms in the past couple of months. Really, the past couple of years, I feel like it's like every year around the holidays, right before you get into, the holiday season, there's some big storm that's on the news and it's always, right in that area. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing okay though, and that, you made it through unscathed, it sounds like. But, Florida's always been I've loved Florida I mean, really my entire life. I mean, I was born and raised in Atlanta. And
Okay.
so when I was a kid, Florida was, our vacation spot. That's where we went to go get a little slice of paradise when we wanted to get out of the city. So,
Is it mostly Disney? I have to ask.
so I went to Disney World when I was younger, like, I mean, probably 6 or 7. And that was until a few years ago, the last time that I had been to Disney World. Now I live in Southern California, so we've got Disneyland that's close by, and I've got small kids, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. So we are very, accustomed to taking the kids to Disneyland. But I had a conference, funny enough, talking about Disney World about 2 years ago. And I had forgotten because we've lived in Southern California for almost 10 years now. And then prior to that, we lived in Arizona. And so, kind of thinking back to my childhood, I had kind of blocked out, I think, the summer heat and the humidity that you get in Florida. And so
I
I
don't
had
know
a
what you're talking
conference.
about.
I had a conference and see folks that live there don't help it out at all with me trying to plan my trips. So I had this conference that was planned for the middle. It was right after the 4th of July. And this was 2 years ago. So my kids would have been like 4 and 2 at that time. And so me and my, young, immature dad wisdom was like, hey, look, I've got to go to this conference. I'm going to bring the family with me and we'll just make a whole trip out of it. And we'll take the kids to Disney World. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't really think through the fact that it's going to be the middle of July and I'm going to have 2 really small kids with me in an outdoor theme park for a 3-day period. You would have thought my kids were going to explode. I've never seen 2 kids more miserable. Like we would get them off of that train to go into the parks and they were just literally melting. Like you could see the sweat beating and just rolling off their face before we even got into the park. So needless to say, I bought a lot of ice cream and popsicles on that trip.
I can understand that. And I have to say that we hibernate in the summer. So we crack up when tourists come to Disney in the summer because we're like, seriously, hottest time of the year. And then we also know the tourists in the winter because those are the people who come down and they get in the water. And we're like,
Yeah.
that water's freezing right now, but not to them. It's always
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they're coming from Southern California, that water is like bath water. Cause I mean, the water
Correct.
out here is talk about freezing. I mean, if it gets over 75 degrees, it is boiling for people that are locals. But yeah, 60 degrees is usually around, is somewhere between like 65 and 72 or three. It's about the
Yeah.
hottest it gets out here water wise. So yeah, we love to go to Florida and get in the water and talk about how warm it is when we get back home.
Well, I'm glad somebody feels it's warm.
Yeah,
We're wimps. We
exactly.
are. I'll admit it. We're wimps.
So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about yourself. Obviously, we've chatted about, kind of where you're located at, but talk to me a little bit about your professional career. I know you've had quite an extensive career in speaking and you've written several things. So share a little bit about, kind of an overview of your Shine framework and, some of the, accomplishments you've had professionally.
Cool. It's a journey that never anticipated, never thought I'd have. I really didn't know what I wanted to go into when I went to college. And so I went ahead and chose psychology because I do like psychology. And my first semester, I got a GPA of a 1.2 and I was put on probation to be kicked out. And I thought, okay. And that kind of reflected my grades in high school. I did great in elementary because it was all about hands on learning and just getting a chance to move and the way that I love to learn. And so I was going to be kicked out and I said, okay, you're going to kick me out. Fine. I have one more semester. I'm going to just look and see if I can take sign language. And I sure enough could take sign language, but in order to do that, I had to go into the College of Education. And so I became a teacher for the deaf. And that led me
Wow.
into just teaching for 10 years and absolutely loved it. I did not teach specifically in classrooms for the hearing impaired or the deaf because I had a dual certification and I ended up being in a regular ed classroom teaching. And I stayed there, but I taught sign language and I incorporated sign language into a lot of what I taught because of the concepts are so grasped by sign language. Like a tree will literally look like a tree. It's really neat. So that was where I ended up going into teaching. I did it for 10 years. I didn't really anticipate leaving that. Loved what I did and loved students, particularly middle school. But then I had a chance to leave. And as I was getting ready to interview to become an assistant principal, because I was a single mom at the time, how do I make more money? So I went and got a second master's. Here we are. Oh, fine, I'll go into administration. And I knew I would enjoy it, but I really loved the classroom. But I had a chance to step out, like I said, and when I did, I had been given the advice that I understand that you need to do it now as a teacher, not as an administrator, because you'll come back if you choose, you will come back as a teacher, but you will not come back as an administrator.
Mm.
And that hit like hard to me. And I thought, well, I'm always one that I want to try other things. I want to see what else is out there. I want to explore. And I ended up becoming a salesperson for a university. And so I had the whole state of Florida. And then they came after 8 months and said, we want you to become regional manager of the Southeast for business development. And I turned it down because I thought it was not going to be something that I wanted. And so a month later, they came back and said, we have been interviewing for a month. We really want you. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I just don't know that it's really where I want to be, but let's go for it because maybe I'll learn something about me and actually love it. And about 3 months into it, I realized I loved it when I was out with the reps in the different states, but I didn't love it when I was back home and holding them accountable for how many sales, calls you have, what's your plan for, networking. And it was just a lot of the minutia, I would say. And so I realized this and I went and did a retreat with another manager and I came home one day and 2 days later, I got a call from a headhunter and the headhunter said, "Wait, I got your name from the school district, and we have a company who's looking for a consultant." And I ended up working for that company, but about a month and a half into it, I saw that all of marketing was laid off. And I went, uh-oh. And so 3 months later, sure enough, laid off too. And that it led me to another company that I was cussed out, screamed at, things were thrown across the room. It was the most toxic culture I couldn't even imagine it. And so let alone experience it. And I found out that I was the eighth person in 10 months in that position. And that all
Wow.
the part-timers had a bet on when I walked in how long I'd last. And so after 4 months, I came home to my husband. I said, I'm jumping. And he's like, wait, what? I said, I'm jumping. I'm going to start my own company. And he's like, okay, I totally support you, but you have to make this work. And I was like, fully aware of that. I know that. And I don't know what that means. I just know that if they can run a company and treat people like that, then I can run a company and treat people right.
Yeah.
And what's crazy, Wes, is when I look back on everything in my life, like teaching is a part of me owning Ignite Your Shine now. I teach, I train, I keynote. I look at the sales part. That's part of owning a business. The business development is, understanding a culture of what you want for people, what you don't want for people, and even seeing processes that were used to understand the bigger picture that is outside of teaching. All of that is where I am today. And
Mhm.
so I ended up writing 8 books unintentionally. I was approached by a publisher and I turned them down at first. And then they're like, LaVonna, you're already teaching this. Like, you're already doing it. You just need to put it into a book format. And so 8 books of how does the brain learn, strategies for teachers, lessons in there so that they can easily apply it. And fast forward of doing that for a while, and I loved it. I loved the brain powered learning aspect of it. However, we weren't seeing exactly the change that we should have seen, and I couldn't figure out why. And then my daughter started having challenges in school similar to mine. And I
Yeah.
reflected on other students that I had. And I went, We have a disconnect here. If we don't put the brain into a state of learning first, then the brain won't learn. So I started teaching Shine, and I'll go through that in a moment, what that actually
Mhm.
represents. But it's shifted because I started having military, I had police officers, I had board of directors coming up, superintendents, teachers themselves. And instead of my vision of thinking this was for students, the words that they were saying is that you have no idea how badly I needed this.
Wow.
And you should be speaking to military, you should be speaking. And my mind like got blown. Like for a while, I couldn't even comprehend it because I was like, wait, what? And then I went, holy cow, this is a human thing. This isn't about kids. And it in some ways, honestly, it's caused challenges for me because I do believe it's for everybody. Because it is, if you're a human who wants to grow and wants to learn how to shine to be the best version of you and bring that personally and professionally, but I know from a marketing perspective, that's hard,
Yeah.
because they even say you speak to everybody, you speak to nobody. And so it's been an interesting journey along the way with all of that, but I will take you through that we are focusing really heavily on leadership, because of leadership is there's a trickle down a lot, and leadership isn't where we need it to be. It affects everybody within the organization. And
Uh-huh.
so, about even school nutrition, if the principal or the school nutrition coordinator, director is not where they need to be, it affects everybody, which then affects everybody else. And so my heart is also for women in leadership. And how do we get the confidence to rise with believing in yourself? And so Shine, I'll take you through, is S, self. And what that really is about is what are your strengths, gifts, skills, talents? Like, what are you good at doing? Because so much of the conversation is around what you're not good at doing. And when
Mhm.
we talk about our strengths, gifts, skills, and talents, those are things we're born with, some things we develop. But when we look at the research from Gallup, it says that a strength of yours will remain a strength, but your weaknesses will never get to the level of those strengths. But we're constantly working over here, which is fine. We can improve, but strengths is the biggest. So I kind of lump all that together. I think about the mindset that we have and how we approach things. It's also around self care. So anything with self goes at the big, big bucket. When we get to H is heart. And it's really about passions, like what lights you up, what gets you excited, what do you love to do? When do you feel that energy? And when do you feel that drain? And so I use H as heart because the P for passions would be ignite your spine, and that's not going to work. So I thought, well, it's really about the heart. Like, where does your heart lead you, and everything else that comes with that? And we put the two together. So S and H need to go together. We call that the shine spot. Because if you have a strength and you're missing a passion, you burn out.
Mm.
If you have a passion and you're missing a strength, that might be more like a hobby. So my dream of like singing, every night on the stage in Vegas with Mariah Carey, it's not going to happen, West, because I have a passion for it. I do not have a strength in singing. So she won't want me. So it's aligning as much as we can, which is fulfillment and happiness in that shine spot. And we get to the letter I in shine as that is inspire. So you have this beautiful package of S&H about you, but we all know life's going to throw us curveballs. Things are going to
Yeah.
happen. So how do you stay inspired and how do you inspire others? Because we believe that you have a responsibility to both yourself and to others. And then N in shine is navigate. What are you doing with everything I've been talking about? It's you putting it into action so that you have your story, your journey. What are your goals? What do you want this life to look like? And we can't control it all, but there are a lot of choices we can make with how we approach things and how we choose to approach those and to live that. And then E is exceptional because you are becoming the exceptional person you are meant to be, not anybody else. So the example I like to give on this one is so often we look at social media and we start scrolling. And even though we know that is not the full picture, the brain forgets and we see compare, 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 compare. And I don't know if you could, West, I know you're seeing me right now, but this is the sign for in mirror for, in sign language. And so it's like you have looking at a compact mirror, your hand is the compact mirror. And when you move it and reflect it, but that's what we do about everybody else. And we forget to look at our own self. And I don't
Mhm.
mean that from a braggadocious, arrogance way, but from a confidence lens.
Mhm. Man, I love that shine framework that you just explained. I mean, there's so much to unpack there, and so I want to jump into a couple of things. First off, I think you could pull off a backup singer or dancer for Mariah Carey. I'm just saying, she's been
Willing to
thawing
try.
out. She's been thawing out for the past 10 months, and she's ready to make her big holiday debut. So she's going to need some folks like you in her background. So keep that dream alive. I support it.
I appreciate
Now,
that.
when you are talking about, self-care, I think self-care is obviously it's been a buzzword, over the course of the past several years, really putting a focus on people's mental health. And, we talk about it a lot in both schools and also just, from a business perspective and industry side as well. What are some tips and strategies that you recommend to people for self-care? I mean, is it as simple as just taking a breather and walking outside and getting some fresh air? Or do you have some specific strategies that you recommend?
It can be. I think the biggest thing is finding what works for you. And I don't know that that's always going to stay the same. So a big shift for me, because I know my question isn't whether people know about self care. My question is, are you doing it? And then are you doing it to the level that you actually find some balance for you? Because there are times, and when I say balance, I don't mean a true balance. Like there are times where I can work all the time. Like I do. I love what I do. And I can work and I can work and I work. And at some point I will go, okay, you know what? I'm like, I need a few days off or I need some backup time. And so I've learned to really listen to me as much as I can. And the big game changers for me is that, yes, it can be breathing, it can be being silent for a while, but it's also recognizing when I'm really ready to do something, when I'm not. So an example I will give you is I go to Orange Theory, for example, Orange Theory
Mm,
Fitness. It's a workout
mhm.
center. I love it. Tell myself I need to go twice a week, but all the other days I want to walk, and I love to walk because my calm is actually nature. My calm is water. My calm is seeing animals out there. And so, luckily, living in St. Pete, I often get to see, manatees, stingray, dolphins. And so that brings so much joy to me. But like this morning, I was going to go to Orange Theory, but to be honest with you, I'm so sorry, or I'm so sore from 2 days ago. So I changed it to Friday and I decided to go out on my walk. And I get down to certain areas along the water, but there is these little ponds and there are ducks there, and I used to raise ducks. And now I have lived here for a year and I haven't done this. But I used to raise ducks because they would be in like in the stream, and we had snapping turtles. And when the babies were
Mm.
born, the snapping turtles would grab them. It's so sad, but grab their little feet, drown them, and eat them. And
Oh
so we
no.
would save them, yeah, and raise them and then release them once they got to where they could survive on their own. But they learn you. Like they would come and still you could sit down and they would cuddle up on your lap and fall asleep
Mm,
because they had come to know you growing up and they would follow you just like a mother, like in a line. It's so cute. So I looked at these ducks and I thought, you know what? I haven't been feeding that part of me. And so
mm,
I bought organic duck food and I go down and I just started this last week. That's how recent it is. And they literally, I sit down, I feed them. One of them in particular comes and eats straight out of my hand, but it takes me back to that calm. So I either stop at a certain point and I will just have silence and meditate, or I will replace it with the ducks. But this is what I mean by listening to you. If I don't feel like doing a fast walk, I don't go out and do a fast walk. I just walk. I just tell
mm,
myself, get out and move. You don't have to work out at a level today. You do you to get out. But what I often find is my pace picks up and picks up. Next thing you know, I am full on getting the workout that I love. And so I think about that. And the second strategy that I'll share too is the way that I schedule. So, for example, I put everything on my calendar that has to go on. There are
mm,
meetings that we can't avoid. There are work hours that we have to be at. There are, events that we need to see. So those go on the calendar, things that cannot move. But the second thing I put on there is actually my self care.
mm,
And that is my non negotiable to myself. And so the way that it becomes a non negotiable, and this is the actual game changer part, is that we all know things come up. And so what I used to do is I would move it, and then I would move it and something else would come up. So I would move it and eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what? Forget this. It's not going to happen. So I would delete it, everything out, and my self care would go to the wayside. Now what
Mm,
I do is I'm allowed to move it, but only one time.
mm.
So I'm very intentional about where I move that to. So if I know tomorrow I might have a meeting pop up, could I just go in the morning or could I go later in the day? But once I move it, I know that I'm not allowed to move it again. And so even though I have on my calendar probably 6, 7 days, really there's something on there where I get out and I move, I know that for me, my non-negotiables, I have to get 3 in because I do travel a lot. And it doesn't always work with the exhaustion and the travel schedule to get more than 3 in, but I tell myself, "You're required to get 3, but if you can get 5, 6, even 7, then you're totally winning the game."
It sounds like it's really all about prioritizing and making sure that you have a structure with, you've even implemented some different rules around that prioritization where you're allowed to move it. It's prioritized, but you're allowed to move it, but just within certain parameters. And I mean, I talk to people all the time and it seems like, everyone is wanting to improve their either mental health, their self-care habits and things of that nature. But when you really dig down into what they're doing for quote unquote self-care, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I just sit down and I just, have a little me time where I'll scroll social media or I'll do something that isn't really self-care. In some ways, it seems like people's definition of what qualifies as self-care is really almost destructive because I mean, I don't think there's anyone out there that at this point, maybe there are, that feel that social media is a healthy use of our time. It serves a purpose and it's great for certain things, but to go and build your self-esteem or to go and make yourself feel better about something or to have a mental break where, you're really being grateful for the things that you have, social media is not the place for that. So it's
Nope.
really about, putting those things that are going for a walk, having a mental break, go feed the ducks, which I can totally relate to. We had a monastery when I was growing up right down the street from our house. We used to go and feed the ducks all the time. But you got to watch out for those geese. Those geese are not as nice as those ducks are. But
You are correct. Yes.
but the ducks are very therapeutic and it's really about, picking the right thing for you, but that actually improves your mental health as opposed to doing something that's added detriment to you.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, and you have to be honest and recognize those things for you. What is that? And I think it's different, like I said in the beginning, is it's different for everybody. The other thing I've added in more recently is I want to learn different things. So last
Mhm.
week I took a how to ferment vegetables in a jar class because I just want to do different things. To me, that is self-care.
Yeah.
If I wanna be around people, I do, and if I don't, that's okay too, and just giving permission. So I really do, I think it's tapping back into which really goes back to S&H, but what are your strengths? What are your passions? And especially the H for heart and passions.
Yeah.
Because if you love to learn, then what can you do to build in learning? That's self-care.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the S and the H are really the fuel behind the Shine philosophy, the Shine framework. And, ultimately that fuel is what allows you to have the tools in your tool belt to really go into the N and shine to navigate through challenging times. And,
Yes.
without that fuel, without those tools, you'll never be able to navigate in an effective manner through those challenging times that inevitably happen to all of us, regardless of the industry that we're in. And, I'm curious about that. I mean, obviously you've had, quite a successful career. You've written lots of books, but, success doesn't come without challenges. Is there maybe a landmark challenge or something in your past that you can think back to that was really kind of a pivotal moment for you where you were able to implement your philosophy here to navigate that challenge?
Yes, I would say a lot of my actual life, when I look back, I've always been interested in understanding why when people can go through trauma or can go through extremely tough challenges, why do some choose paths that aren't helpful for you, whether it's like alcohol or drugs or other unhealthy things that we know don't serve us and help us, while others are like I like using the word fuel. It fuels you to I this is not how I want life to be. And I've always been very intrigued by that dividing path. And I've thought, is it someone who is a model for me? Is it strength that has been around me before? Is it just something inside of me that was like, absolutely not. I don't know, but there have been lots of challenges. I would say one of the biggest though was watching my own daughter go through the challenges that I did in the education system and having her, she has ADD. And so she had a 504 when she was in high school that allowed her additional time. And there was unfortunately a teacher who embarrassed her immensely. And it was the first time my daughter advocated for herself. And it was the last time she advocated for herself and around that, and so we really had to work on shine. And that was when I had to reflect on myself and think back to how many times have I really had to not beat myself up over things that I didn't have or didn't do well, but instead, like, what can I control? What do I own? And what are my choices? Like, I won't share the whole part now, but like, I don't know my biological father. I never have known him and I never will because finally got to see one picture of him and it was his obituary. So I saw myself in that, but that is a core of when I was a little girl of not believing in myself. And then my grades showed that I wasn't smart. So I had adopted basically, he walked out because I wasn't good enough. I now know that's not true because I know that I created that story. I don't know the truth, And so I think about, and when I look at it now, the way that I view this is that I have the choice on what I believe about him and about myself. And so the ultimate thing that I landed on, and I could come up with 1,000 stories around this, but what I ultimately landed on was that I I have to like assume basically positive intent. Maybe him walking out was actually the best decision of my life,
Mm.
but I didn't view it that way. And it took me, I am 52 years old. It took me well into my late 40s to begin to have even an inkling of there's more to this story. And you've made an assumption as a reflection of yourself when you were, there is no proof that it's a reflection of me. And so I think about so many challenges in my life that I now have a very different perspective. I don't know about you, Wes, but I wish I could rewind the clock, go back in time, maybe to 30s, but I want the wisdom I have now. I want to
Yeah.
take all of that goodness and understanding and belief in myself and really like have it back then to do some changes. But I also, while I say that, I know that's actually what life is about. Life
Yeah.
is about this journey. It is about making mistakes and realizations and wisdom. And I don't know that we can ever say, ta-da, we've arrived because it's
Mm.
meant to be a journey in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think wisdom is, also another way of just saying, having the confidence in yourself and having the confidence to be able to make a decision decisively. And I mean, I feel like, a lot of young people coming into an industry, regardless of the industry, are very sure of themselves and they don't have that confidence. But over the course of time, you realize that, the little things that we stress out about aren't really always the biggest of deals. And, we're stressing out about it for really no reason. And just having the confidence to keep pushing forward and keep going in the direction that we feel is the right direction for us is something that you just learn in time. Speaking of confidence, you mentioned, kind of, the when you first came into the industry, you had, or you one of the industries that you went into, you worked for a company where, it was a kind of a toxic culture. And, you talked about, kind of overcoming that challenge. There's, probably people out there that are watching this episode that might feel like they're in a challenging situation. What is some advice that you have for people that are going through either a setback or some type of a challenging situation? Life's thrown them a curveball in a way. What's some type of, motivation or inspiration that you would give to people in those types of situations?
I would encourage to definitely have us like step back and really look at different perspectives. Because,
Right.
like I mentioned before, we all are going to create a story, and that story will do anything to protect us. Right. So, my story that I created around all of my different situations and challenges I've had in my life, I have created a story around them, but I don't know that those stories are actually true. And so I think of like even my keynote, for example. If I see two people on the phone, my head can immediately, instantly go to that you're boring. You're being boring.
Mm.
And I know it's not. I know not because remember our surveys, I know that there's raving reviews, right? But immediately the self-doubt will go to that. It's because I've already started to create the story around it. And I think of that there was a time that I went to give a keynote and I had a dress on that day and I wore a belt so that my headset could be like lapel up here on my, my face, but around my mouth, but then have the battery pack on the belt. And I was really, really nervous. And I went to the bathroom and spare you some of those details. But I went to flush the toilet and I realized in my nervousness, I had actually undone the belt. Well, when you have a dress on, you don't need to undo the belt. Just a little TMI for everybody listening. So I
Mm,
have a decision to make on what do I do? And in my head, I immediately went, that's exactly how your talk's going to go. Right? People are not going to
mm,
like you. They're going to think you're boring. I don't know whoever thought you could do this because you sure as heck don't think you could do this. You might as well quit right now. And I, whoom, 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 like my mindset just went straight down, my self talk right down the toilet too. And I had to realize that I it's up to me because I can
mm,
choose to believe that. And so that's a funny, like, side challenge, but there's no difference than when we're actually in a challenge. We have a choice on the story that we create, the actions we do from it, what we decide to believe from that, and only we can control that. Because other
mm,
people can tell us all day long, you're great, you're awesome, it's going to turn out, everything's going to be okay. Oh, don't worry, it's just a moment. And we can share that as a technique, and we do, that it is a moment, right? It doesn't mean it's all of life. It's not a bad day or tough day. It's a moment in time. But we are making those decisions. So again, when I that happened to me, I knew I had to solve it. Like I have a saying that what you tell your brain believes.
mm,
So I'll say it again. What you tell your brain believes. And so we choose to reinforce that message every time. And whether it's a voice from the past of a family member, educator, another adult in our life, ourselves, a kid, like, it doesn't matter where that voice comes from. But if we choose to listen to it, it has power. And so when we're in those challenges and those moments of trying to figure out, okay, and how do I choose from this? It's taking a step back and basically saying, like, what do I want for me? I believe every challenge has a lesson. And it's up to me to grasp that lesson and then go forward with it. Like if you think about any challenge that you have gained a strength, gift, skill, superpower from it. And the way that I'll prove that is if you think about a challenging moment in your life, and if you need to pause this to think about that, pause. But if not, I want you to think like, okay, this is a challenge I've had. And I'm willing to bet you have gained a superpower or strength when we whittle it all the way down to one word, or maybe it's a hyphenated word. Like it could be resiliency, grit,
yeah,
faith, self-love, empathy, compassion. There's so many words, flexibility, adaptability. Like we could just go on and on. But those did not come from, this is where we get into Enver Navigate, because they didn't come from when you were on the path navigating. It came from when you're actually off the path navigating. That challenge, you are off your path of where you wanted to be, but man, you have learned some things that actually serve you today.
mm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like positive self talk is one of those overlooked, really, I guess, skills that you really need to practice on a regular basis. I mean, it's not something that you're necessarily just born with, good positive self talk. It's something that you really have to implement and practice. And I mean, one of the things that I've done over the years is, just as simple as, to get started, because you might have people out there watching this saying, well, how do I even get started with positive self talk? I can't think of anything to, tell myself, or I feel silly doing it. And, one of the things I did was just write down, I am, blank, just, give yourself some prompts. You need to start off with being grateful for things. I'm grateful for blank. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for, the fact that we have food that my kids ravage out of my pantry on a regular basis, whatever it might be. But, ultimately, starting off with writing down those little things so that you can have those prompts to really bring yourself back on those challenging days where you might feel really down and in the dumps. You can go and reference that little 3x8 card and read those either, words of gratitude or those positive affirmations that you've put down for yourself.
Yes, and I will add to that too that, yeah, I think those are 2 great strategies. And then let's add another one, and that one is because when I ask people to think about their strengths, it's amazing to watch them go blank. Like
Mm,
ugh. But if I say, "Well, what do you think you're not good at?" They're like, "Oh gosh, I'm not good at," and they start rattling it
mm,
off. And so that is always a sign to me that you're not thinking about what you actually are good at doing. And it's okay because that's the value you bring. That's what you contribute to your family, to yourself, to a team, to a company or organization. And so focusing more on that. And so one of the techniques that I use, and this is more of like a psychological technique, but you have to distance yourself from you. So if you say, for example, what would a best friend say that I was good at doing? Or what would
Mhm.
my mom say that I was good at doing? Or what would a stranger who just met me might say that I'm good at doing? And now, because it's not so personal, because a lot of us are taught to be humble and to not look at ourselves that way, which is why I want to stress again, this isn't about being arrogant. It is about being confident and saying, you know what, I am good at this. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I'm the best, but I am good at this. Like I can definitely support our team or support you in doing this because I do have some strengths with this. And so if that helps distance the self, that's just another strategy that a lot of times that's when I see the light bulb go on of, oh, my best friend would say this or so and so would say that. Yeah. Now you say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that the reality is that if we had a friend that talked to us the way that we oftentimes talk to ourselves, we would probably not be friends with that
No,
person anymore. So we really
guaranteed.
need to reframe and change the way that we're talking to ourselves about ourselves to really, boost us up through those tough times. LaVonna, I know we're getting short on time here, so I want to give you an opportunity to kind of share a little bit about how people can get a hold of you. You know, if they are sitting out there watching this and they're like, gosh, this is a message that we really want to bring to our folks. How can they get a hold of you? And, do you have a website or anything that you can direct people to?
Yes, absolutely. Igniteyoursshine.com. So again, igniteyoursshine.com. You can find that on all social media platforms except X. And you can go to igniteyoursshine.com, and that's where there's a contact form. You can learn more about it. And we'd just love to connect with you no matter what. And just to hear, thoughts of what you thought about this podcast and even just in general, if there's ahas or realizations you had, we want to celebrate that with you and for you. So also you can find me at LaVonna Roth on all platforms except X. So it's LaVonna, LaVonna, and Roth is ROTH.
And we'll put all of that information in the show notes as well so that people can easily just click on it down below. LaVonna, thanks so much for being on the show with us today and sharing a little bit about your Shine framework. For anyone out there that wants to get a hold of LaVonna, please, please, please click on the link, reach out to her and find out more about how she can come and inspire and lift up your folks at your school district as well. LaVonna, I like to leave with one final question here, if you will, and this is going to be a curveball for you. But I like to
Okay.
ask, if you had a billboard and you could put anything that you wanted to on the billboard for the entire world to see every single day that they come and leave or go to and leave work, what would your billboard say?
It's not anything uncommon, but it'd be you are enough.
Mm, I love it.
It's
I
that
love it.
simple.
I
And
love it.
Wes, thank you for having me. Oh my goodness, such a joy talking to you and connecting with you. So thank you for all that you do because you're bringing so much positivity out there too. And we need it. We need it.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well, we look forward to having you on the show again. And for everyone out there, thanks so much. We hope you have a wonderful and blessed week.